There are a lot of great semi-auto pistols out there. Some are new, others are old, and they are relied on for self-defense, target practice, and hunting. Additionally, some of them are relied on by both military and law enforcement personnel. Now, one of the oldest and possibly the most respected is the 1911, and I want to tell you what I know about it. It's a hammer-fire, single-action, semi-automatic. Magazine is unloaded. Now, the 1911 is America's longest-serving sidearm, and it is made by many different gun companies in America and worldwide. This one was made in the Philippines by Rock Island Armory, and it is chambered in 9mm. The 1911, though, is most commonly chambered in .45 ACP, and because of that, a lot of people are just stumped when they find out that the handgun can be offered in different calibers. Well, believe it or don't, it's certainly not a new concept. They have been making 1911s in other calibers since well before World War II. This includes 38 Super Auto, 10mm, 40 Smith & Wesson, 380 ACP, and I'm sure that there are other ones. This one has a 5-inch barrel, and it's a full size, but they also make compact versions, which is perfect for concealed carry. And since its origins, it virtually has remained the same at its core, although there have been some subtle adjustments over the course of time. It has a pad safety that must be engaged in order to set the hammer off. I don't like to dry fire, so I'm going to gently guide the hammer back in place. On top of that, it also comes with the thumb safety that can only be engaged with the hammer pulled back. Watch this. The pad safety is engaged. It's pushed in. Won't shoot. This is made so that a carrier who's carrying with a live round in the chamber can just draw and quickly thumb off the safety. This is definitely a safety measure. With its all-metal configuration, it is a bit weighty, but that also attributes to its durability and its reliability. Its palm grits, though, can be polymer or they could be wooden. I just so happen to have the polymer ones, and it's pretty standard for them to come with a single stack magazine, although some modern models are double stack, and depending on the size and the caliber of the firearm, the mag capacity can vary. This one's a 10-shot magazine, and a .45 ACP this size would probably carry 8 rounds. Now, why is the 1911 so successful? Well, we'll have to go all the way back to the year 1898, when America went to war with Spain. It was during this time where the standard sidearm for militaries worldwide was that of a revolver. And it was also at this time where semi-auto pistols were becoming a brand new phenomenon. So America's war with Spain had actually triggered a war in the Philippines, and during this time, the American soldiers were issued a Colt 1892 double-action revolver chambered in .38 long Colt, and it was supposed to be all the rage. But with the close combats in the thick jungles. It soon found that the revolver, as well as the caliber, was totally inadequate because the guerrillas were doped up on drugs, and they were just dead set on fighting and taking the Americans out. And despite the fact that they were shot point blank multiple times, they were completely impervious to the knockout power of the revolver, and sadly many American soldiers had perished. So in order to alleviate the situation, the American military ended up resorting to pulling out their old Colt M 1873 single-action revolvers that were chambered in .45 long Colt. Now, a lot of these revolvers dated all the way back to the Plain Indian Wars, so some of these were pretty old at the time. Now, the stopping power did much better, but the one problem was a single action is not a very fast-acting mechanism, and the American military realized quickly that they needed a new sidearm. So those who were not at war were doing experiments with many different calibers, and after trying out the .45 caliber, coupled with the effective stopping power that soldiers in combat had witnessed, they decided that they needed to have a new pistol, a fast-shooting pistol that was no smaller than a .45 caliber. And this was the year 1904, and it just so happened to have been the year when John Browning had developed the .45 ACP, and that was just 2 years after Georg Luger had invented his, or started producing his 9mm. And just like the 9mm, the .45 ACP is one of America's favorite rounds. Now, in the year 1906, 6 different companies had submitted different pistol designs as a potential new sidearm for the military. And quickly, 3 of these sidearms were rejected, and the 3 left behind by Colt, Savage, and BMW were requested to be redesigned. It was only Colt and Savage that had redesigned their guns, and starting on from 1907, torture tests and experiments were carried out, and pretty soon only the Colt and the Savage were the only candidates. And in the year 1910, both guns were test fired with 6,000 rounds fired through, and it was the Colt that came out victorious. It performed flawlessly with no malfunctions, where the Savage had 37 malfunctions, so it was dismissed, and the Colt was the winner. And with the intense firing of 6,000 rounds over the course of only 2 days, the gun would very easily heat up, and it was simply cooled down by sticking it in a barrel of water. And John Browning himself was there to supervise. Simply stood there, watched on as his masterpiece was worked on. And it's really no surprise that it was his design that ended up winning the competition, because that man was one of the best gun designers in history. The design of this new Colt pistol came at perfect timing, because in the year 1916, America had to do some combat in Mexico, and then the following year, we entered World War I, and a lot of the combat was done in the trenches, which meant there was an awful lot of close-range fighting, and 1911 and .45 ACP did its job well. shortly after World War One, a lot of soldiers had some feedback of how the pistol can be improved ergonomically, and some of these improvements included a shorter trigger and adjusted sights. And slowly and subtly, these improvements were made, and they were all complete in the year 1924. And ironically, just 2 years later, Mr. Browning had passed away due to a heart attack. Then once World War II came, the demand for 1911 was very high, and so many other gun companies were then contracted into making and selling new 1911s. And after the war, well, since so many soldiers were well familiar with their sidearm, they continued using them for target practice, and the popularity has just grown on, and it really hasn't shown any signs whatsoever of a decline in popularity. I mean, however, in the year 1985, as I have mentioned in another video, the United States military did switch from the 1911 over to the Beretta M9 in 9mm. So, the 1911 had served in the U.S. Army since March 29, 1911, up until 1985. And I should also add that the U.S. Navy and Marines adopted the Colt as their sidearm in 1913. However, the 1911 did not completely disappear from the U.S. military entirely. There have been times where people would switch back, and I have heard a veteran or two mention that while they're still serving in the mid to late 90s, that they still had the Colt. And even today, some certain departments in the military and law enforcement are huge sticklers for the 1911 and their .45 ACP due to the more powerful and stopping power of it as opposed to the 9mm. Now, there is a little bit of a catch when it comes to purchasing a 9mm. I mean, they're not cheap at all. The cheapest one I've ever seen, it was not a budget pistol, cost $700. This one, though, I bought on sale at Buy-Mart for only $400. And if only I had waited just one more month, I could have bought it for only $350. It's disappointing, but at the end of the day, I am stoked that I could finally own such a cool piece. I knew that when I saw its design a long time ago as a kid, that I wanted to own something like this one day. And I'm glad that I could finally own one. I haven't had a chance to put many rounds through it just yet, so I haven't really got to know this gun very well, but I do look forward to doing that a little bit more, and hopefully I can do that in the really near future. But a lot of people really don't let the high price of the 1911 deter them from purchasing one because, yes, it's very reliable, and it's very accurate, and a lot of people use it for, as I've mentioned, for self-defense. And just having a gun that does come at a higher price, in this case, guarantees that you will be investing in an excellent investment.